has been argued that no matter what period of history we're talking about African Americans, there have been two contending movements. There's the integrationist approach and the nationalist approach. And they may go by different names, but that's kind of the belief and the action of what, Black America argues. When we talk about integrationists, that's more of working within the system, more conciliatory approach, etc. Nationalism is a little bit different. It's seen under nationalism, you have your separatist groups, etc., etc. Some of this will come out as we begin to talk about these particular individuals. We went on to talk about styles of leadership. And I gave you several quotes at the end of class on Friday. And they came from some very profound, prolific thinkers. The name Bernard, Berdahl, Harold Cruz, and James Baldwin. And this is something I want you to keep looking at as we go through our discussion, particularly of this first group of individuals. It says, since power and prestige are scarce commodities in the Negro community, the struggle for leadership often becomes ruthless. Do you think that is still a phenomenon today? Power and prestige are seen as being scarce commodities within the African American community. Therefore, it is argued, I'm not saying you have to agree, but it has been argued by this person that since prestige and power are scarce, limited, the competition for leadership can become not just brutal, but ruthless. Ruthless is kind of a strong word. First of all, do you agree, disagree? And tell me, where have you seen it? Do you see it today? Bring it to this 21st century. Yes, Ms. Savage.
I would say that I agree, and I would just, to bring it to the non-political realm,
okay.
I don't really see any other ethnic group beef in rap music the way that Black people do, like that. So I kind of think that's just a small example of that.
Okay. Anybody else?
I don't think that right now in the 21st century we have a convergence of Black leaders. We don't have those Kings, those Malcolm X's. I mean, you see the likes of like Al Sharpton and Andrew Jackson.
I get you.
But there's no political fight. The political fight is pockets of people, pockets of individuals, not necessarily vying to be that leader. I think we've lost that once Obama left office.
Okay.
I was just going to say, in districts where you have these kind of prominent leaders, like Ryan Congressman, Maxine Waters, and kind of other Black people are scared to run against her, so there's not really that competition, because she's made a name for herself and she's done it, so she's not monopolized. But like, people know they won't win against her, and other districts is the same way. They know they won't, other Black people know they won't win against this prominent Black leader, so they don't try and run with the same people. Not to say they're bad, but there's no competition.
Okay, and you all raised a good point.
I love you.
He argues, and he quotes some other people that feel like we hadn't had a leader, and some people say, well, we don't need a leader. Some people say we'll have that debate again. But they feel like we hadn't had leaders at that caliber since King and the Malcolm X's. And so, but he also brings up the point that there are different types of leadership, so you have to look at that. What I've heard is mainly political leadership, but there is also what we call intellectual leadership. And he will argue, I'm speaking from Colonel West, that you have people now that think that they are WEB, of course, 21st century, but they are not. And you have people that think that they are the Martin Luther King of today, but they are not. That we haven't had that real kind of leadership since back in the day. And if that's true, that's not good, probably.
You said it's not good to have that type of leadership?
No, it's not good that we don't have leadership.
Because I think a lot of, like in the political realm, a lot of people were looking towards like Cory Booker, for example, to be that intellectual leader, to be that one to step out and say, this is what we as a Black people need to be doing for each other. But I do agree that we don't have a symbol. where we had that, where there was one in the sixties. But also I believe that because we've come so far from that, there really isn't a necessary need for it.
And that's an argument. Some people say we don't need that, we don't see it because we don't need it this day. And that's debatable.
Well, we do, because they're trying to take away our right to vote, but that's not.
And we're gonna talk about how that leadership comes about in just a second. We kind of alluded to it on Friday a little bit. So the point being, you got these various leaders, but this is based upon the observance of Bernard Murdoch. He wrote a classic book, it's still one we still allude to. That's a good book when what they say is still relevant and still applicable to any day. So he says, looking at this thing, power and prestige being these scarce commodities that they are, the vie for leadership. And I told you, even you do see a lot of fight. We don't have to bring it to the national level or national prominence. You can bring it down to your local church. You can bring it down to the whatever. You see this constant bickering as to who's going to be in charge. And so what is the reason that fight, that contention constantly appears in the African American community?
I think it's maybe because of the limitations that the government has on how many African American leaders can be out in the upfront of everything. So I think it's competition because of the fact that a lot of founders or people now kind of force us to be in competition with one another because there's not many spots awarded to Black people.
And I told you, this is something in the, I was with some people, I don't know, but they were not Black. And I can't remember what circle we were in. And so somebody brought up that HNIC, they were like, what is that? And so they were trying to educate them on what that means. But that's a real phenomenon that happens, and this is where it fits. So you constantly see Black people vying to be that top person on every level. And it doesn't have to be at the level of a Martin Luther King versus a Malcolm X and blah, blah, blah. You see it in just everyday occurrences. Okay, then we look at this quote. American Negro history is basically a history of conflict between integrationist and nationalist forces in politics and economics, culture, no matter what leaders are involved or what the slogans were. How many of you are familiar with Harold Cruz? If you're not, Google him and look at some of his works. He wrote some very profound things. But his most prominent book was called The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual. And notice I keep using the word Negro because that's what it was called back at that time. The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual. And then, of course, I know you've heard of James Baldwin. His quote says, "The problem of Negro leadership has always been extremely delicate, dangerous, and complex. The term itself becomes remarkably difficult to define the moment one realizes that the real role of the Negro leader in the eyes of the American Republic was not to make the Negro a first-class citizen, but to keep him content as a second-class one." That's what James Baldwin said. And so from that, we're going to look at the styles of leadership. We kind of played around with that word leadership on Friday, and you threw out some terms, how you would describe it, what you would expect from a leader. Some of you used the word charismatic. Some of you used the word accountable. That person to be accountable. Do you think, and this is kind of what we were dealing with just a moment ago, do you think Black leadership is different, or should be different from other types of leadership, or is it the same? Is leadership just leadership?
Well, leadership can be leadership because there's different areas of focus that, certain leaders have to focus on. And when it comes to being a Black leader, there are Black issues that that person is leading for. And that's why it's not the same as just regular leadership.
Okay.
But isn't it leadership, the idea of leadership is the same though. There is no, because as a Black person, I can lead a group of white people just like I can lead a group of Black people. My leadership style is gonna be what it is. It doesn't matter who or what you're talking about. It's about knowing your audience and being able to lead them into doing to get to that specific goal. So I think that I feel like leadership is leadership across the board, whether it be good leadership or bad leadership. It doesn't matter the person's color.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, if we were ever like to focus on just like one issue, and she's just saying like being like a leader for like one thing, as far as like being a black leader with black issues, then that's what I was kind of referring to. I was just like,
I guess, the way that I heard it was like, is it leadership, is it the same across the board, or does it change? That's what I'm thinking, it doesn't, leadership in and of itself doesn't change, but forms of leadership and the people that are leading changes.
okay, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, to kind of agree with her, I feel like leadership just should be the same across the board. Like, I don't think that I don't think that when it comes to like black issues or like black things that have to do with black people, that it should be a race, like, not that it should be a race thing, but that the color, basically that it should be a race thing. With leadership, I feel like it's just the same. Like, I don't think that black people should take a different type of style to lead. Like,
That makes sense.
I think it's the same thing.
I think that leadership, I agree with what they're saying, leadership is pretty much the same across the board, but I think the black leaders are held to a higher standard. For example, look at Obama and Trump. Well, really any other president, if they did what Trump did, I feel like even one of the things called Mexicans rapists and murderers, or call African countries as whole countries or anything like that, you know, I feel like they would pretty much be, in recent modern day history, it would be a huge scandal. With Trump, it's like nothing he does can ever affect the American people because nobody's surprised anymore. But I feel like if Obama did it, people would really be mad. Like if he said that about white people, it would be a whole different story. So I think that black people, black leaders, they're looked at differently and they're held to a higher standard.
But does their leadership style change? But
Their leadership style doesn't change, but I feel like they have to work harder to be a quote unquote just a better leader. Because Trump can get away with doing
Trump
a lot
a
of
leader?
things. Well, I mean, he's
Or does he just hold the title of leader?
It's good leaders and bad leaders. Hitler was a leader. Unfortunately, I mean, yeah, he leading the world to everybody think his racism is okay now. So
Well, we've always thought, I think he just brings us to the forefront.
yeah.
To ask your question, he probably is leading because if you're leading, you do have followers.
Yeah.
And he has significant followers. It depends on who they are. We have followers. Okay.
So they also
I saw
have
a hand.
leaders and good and
Is
bad.
that leadership? Okay. Yes.
I was gonna say, like, as far as like being a black leader, it's like you're also like she said you're held at a high standard. You're also like more confined depending on who your audience is. Like, for instance, like Obama was president of the entire United States, so it's like he has to work within like confines to make sure like anything he does is not seen as too black. Whereas, like, say somebody more radical, they could just say, "Look, I'm for black people, doing this for black people," and that's that. If you don't like it, oh well.
Does anybody have a different perspective?
What about those black people that said that he wasn't black enough?
That's what I'm saying. Like,
So
it's,
it's like,
no, I'm saying like he was still like as the president of the United States, he's held at like he's held in like a certain construct, so he can't do anything that's like perceived as too black. So it's like to appease the majority of Americans.
You know,
If that makes sense.
You bring in another dynamic. I understand what you're saying, but I'm gonna come back to that. Let me see here from here to here.
No, I was gonna carry on with what he said. A leader understands their audience. So, for example, Obama, he's supposed to be representing every single type of American, black, white, Asian, Hispanic. With Trump, he's targeting his audience, his followers, is just the white followers or the more extreme Americans. So that's why he's able to just go radical on that part. Whereas Obama, he can't just target just the black community instead because he's supposed to be representing everybody, not just.
And so you bring up a point. And so if a leader is a leader, and I would agree, but how far do we take that when it comes to the black community? Because I'm gonna flip the question. If a leader is a leader, do you want a white person to be your leader? Can a white man be the leader of African
what city it was, but I think maybe it was like in Chicago. There's a white guy. Who's,
Yeah, he is.
what is his position?
I heard you mention something.
Father Flager, he really leads the black people. So I feel like it's a certain extent to it though. Like, do you really want a white person to lead you? Because I'm not racist. It's nothing wrong with racist, but but can you really understand it?
Can a white be the leader
Yeah,
of Black America?
you can't really understand.
Like that. I always have to think like, does a person really understand? What
Yeah, can you? Although you might have, because some white people think they've been through the same things that black people have been through, so that makes them feel that they can help lead. But I don't know, so I'ma just shut up.
It's about a half minute, and then I'll come back around. In the back, these two in the back. Ms. Jones and then Ms. Williams.
Like just like what Michael was saying, like about the pastor. So basically, I go to this church. So basically, he's a white man, but a lot of people don't like him because they figure that he's a white man. He's trying to lead these black people, but some people don't agree with his thoughts. But I feel like it's the way, like she said, like the things he has experienced. So he feel like that he can connect with the black people in the church as well. So when people hear his stories, they oh well, we can connect with him. So maybe that's his way of his showing the way he can show his leadership. Maybe his lives.
But some people take it wrong and feel like he's trying to fit in with like black people in the community too much to like prove a point of his leadership. But I feel like sometimes black people don't really go through what black people go through. They just hear experiences and feel like they know exactly what they're going through.
That's what I say too.
Yeah, I feel like the question of whether or not a white person can lead black people, it doesn't necessarily have to do with, it has more to do with, can we say that a white person can have the same experiences as a black person? Because I believe leadership is based on experience. So like either yes or no, either a white person can experience what a black person can or they can't. If they can't and they don't have the experience, there's no way that they can lead because they just have the experience.
Now we'll throw out another question. So is the black leader always the leader? Who have had those same experiences?
Never.
I'm asking those questions because they're gonna come up again.
I feel like no, because sometimes some black people forget where they come from and they feel like now they just feel like they go the same thing that white people go through and they just forget that they're black.
Ben Carson.
For real.
He done lost his damn mind.
A lot of black leaders come not to say like, oh yeah, everybody's like upper whatever class or upper class, but a lot of them to get into that position, they have been on the better end of things. There are some leaders who personally have had, started from the bottom or less, but everybody doesn't have the same experience.
And that's the point, we make those assumptions because not all blacks have had that quote unquote negative, not all. A significant portion have not. And you raised a question, some people asked about Obama. And this gets deep, we're gonna scrape on it a little bit, we're not gonna go too much in depth, but even skin color. And, so it's a question of who the group will respect. And so we could have this discussion in here, but I don't think too many black people would submit to white leadership. There are some, but they might see that they don't have that, or feel like they don't have that experience. But then what is that experience? Because then you get into another category of thinking that blacks have it, because sometimes the black person hasn't had it either. And so these become very deep questions that we try to grapple with, and they do come up. I guess Obama would be the latest, but this is kind of a little bit different, but there's something called Congressional Black Caucus. There was a white man, I forgot his name, that wanted to be a member of the Congressional Black Caucus. And the Congressional Black Caucus members said no. And also, there was another, because you have this growing phenomenon of black conservatives, there were some black conservatives that wanted to be a part of the Congressional Black Caucus. And they were, and some chose not to be because they said, I don't agree, identify with that. So it becomes a question of who are these leaders? What should they be? I'm still asking, is that leadership different? Is it something that's called upon these other than, we know Black America is held to a higher standard, but is it something that's different or should be different about the leaders of Black America?
If I may, can I play devil's advocate or something? We always keep saying we want our representation to be we want our representative or our leader to represent the people, right? They want to represent that general mass of people. Like devil's advocate, wouldn't you say that we continue to isolate ourselves by saying, no, black community should only have a black leader? Don't you think we're isolating ourselves in that and we're keeping that traditional segregational ways? If we're supposed to be America, a melting pot of all these different cultures, shouldn't we be welcome and open to having, regardless of the color of your skin, any type of leader that accurately represents that group of people?
Can you rephrase it? I think I understand what you're saying, but I don't really understand what you're saying.
So we're always scared of this idea of racism, right? The fact that we're going to be discriminated against because of the color of our skin, right?
Mm-hmm.
We always, but at the same time, we say that we want our leaders, our representatives to pretty much look like us, to be us, right? But don't you think that way of thinking is only going to continue the racism? It's going to continue to isolate ourselves because we only allow a black leader to be a black leader of a black community. Don't you think that we're working backwards?
Oh, okay. That's a good question. That's a real good question.
And you're gonna run across that in the reason, because some people say it isolates you. And sometimes, I'm gonna throw this out, and I'm not necessarily being a devil's advocate, sometimes it may be the white person that can do better than the black. So we make assumptions, is the point I'm making. And sometimes assumptions can be faulty. We understand where they come from, but that's the point of having these discussions, so we can rethink and regroup. Because what we've been doing obviously, it's worked in a limited capacity, but maybe we need to start thinking about something else. That's why we're gonna bring in all these different voices. I don't know who's that. We'll go back here. And I saw your hand, I had heard you like in the back, and then I come back up here to Ms. Hutchinson. Yes, Ms. Savage.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, you used the words like isolation and racism, kind of like they were associated with each other. And so I would say, like, I don't necessarily agree that isolation equals racism, or that isolation has to be a bad thing, you know? So that's my perspective, is like, I don't know, because I do feel like black people have been voting on white people, depending on white people for a very long time. Like, I don't think that we've just been only depending on black people or whatever. Like, we've been voting Democrat, and we wanted Hillary, we wanted Bill Clinton, and we wanted all of these white people that came in and, you know, they didn't do anything. So personally, I don't think that there's anything wrong with isolation. Like, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Let's deal with that. Is there anything wrong with isolation?
Yes.
Because it leaves people out.
It does.
It doesn't include everyone.
Yeah, when you start looking at isolation, then you're looking at a separate but equal. And I think that for many black people, we don't want to agree to it, but we are very separatist people. We want to be separate. We want to still have the rights to vote. We want to have those things, but we want to be. It would be great if an HBCU was an HBCU only. If a black fraternity or sorority was just
black people only.
Sorority, that is what we want. We may not want to say it out loud because it's not the politically correct thing to say, but we do want to have our own government. We do want to have our own voice. We do want to have these things that are just for black people. We just
so is that cake and eat it too?
Yes.
Because you're saying, I want to go to Vanderbilt. Let me into Harvard. Let me into Yale, but don't you dare come to Fisk University.
Right.
That's crazy.
Like we want inclusion, but we don't want it. Like, don't come here to get it, but we gonna go there to get it.
But how do we do that? Because other people gonna look at that like, no, it doesn't work like that. Like it just can't work like that. Yeah.
I can't, as a black person,
We don't have that position of power. We don't have that position of power.
So this is the point I'm getting.
Black people can be
When
racist.
we talk about isolation.
Yes,
we
you
don't have
can.
any position. We don't have a position of power over anybody.
Are we talking about socially? Because when you start talking about isolation, you better get it good and understand it, because you deal with an economic component. And then you're making assumptions. Are all blacks on the same page? Because you're talking about, you got to maintain isolation. If you're going to do it, let's do it. But do you have the resources to do it?
Because we depend on the white man.
But what is the black experience like? I understand, like you.
This is my black
Okay,
experience class.
okay, because look, you said your initial question was, is there a difference between leadership with black
I'm
people
saying,
and
is
white
it?
America?
Should it be?
So, what if there's a black leader that doesn't actually know, like, what the black America, like, I literally believe that there's some black people who literally have lived their life like their outside is white. So how can they actually understand or even?
What does that mean?
What do you mean?
No, okay, so
Their inside is white, you mean?
yes, like that. No, like okay, but you mean like they live their life as a white person. So how can they? So
We can't keep doing it. Like Dr. Evangel said, there are some African Americans who haven't had
that black experience.
Well, I'm not agreeing with saying that they're white.
No, but I'm saying,
she's
but
saying yeah, that's what she's trying.
That's what I'm saying.
They've not worded the correct way.
I'm probably didn't word it the right way.
Yeah.
So how could that even be different? Like I don't understand. Like if they've lived their life like a white person, how is it different than?
Because like you were talking about status and how you could be an Oprah Winfrey and one day just you
Yeah.
get a position.
I don't think that's possible. There was like a police officer who said he had the cops, like a black police officer said he had the cops call on him while he was on duty as, oh, there's a black man impersonating a police officer looking for
Oh my gosh.
As far as like color goes, even if you don't see yourself or you don't identify with black people, you're still black. People still look at you. Your skin is still the same color, so they will discriminate against you. They won't pick you or whatever. So you're still dealing with it, even if you decide to be blissfully unaware that you are
run
dealing
across
with
that
it.
too.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna find out that sometimes it's a phenomenon we don't talk about a lot, but sometimes the people that feel the pressure more of racism are the middle class. Why do they feel it more? Because they've done everything they're supposed to do. They have what they're supposed to. I know some saying supposed to have, but yet you run into this issue. So it's harder for those people to deal with it because this is not supposed to happen to me. I have a certain kind of car. I have a certain income. I live in a certain place. I carry myself in a certain way, the way you say I should. And yet, and so that's what we call the force of blackness, where we're not a monolithic group, and whites, we're saying whites, but whites are not a monolithic group either. But what is the skin color for African Americans? Yes.
Okay, so I want to go back to address Jesus' questions, and I'm going to try to like break it down the best way I can. I feel like it's kind of that way when it comes to us not fully wanting to be led by white people, or that we only trust black people, is because I feel like we're going to get to the state where it can be about unity and mixture of cultures once we're good. I feel like once we're good, we feel like we can be led by someone who can relate with us, which is black people. And once we get that under control first, once we're feeling like we have equal inclusion, equal opportunities, economically, and in all other areas, I feel like that's when we can first feel like, okay, now we're good on this level, so now we can go to white people and start, mixing in. But I feel like when it's like we skip that step and it's just automatically white people coming in, we have not gotten our needs met, it's going to continue to be that way. And I think that's why we're in that condition like right now.
Integration, we're going to talk about integration. Integration would be good. It's a good thing if it is truly integration. But integration has not happened the way it should. And I like the fact, this is personal, but to make a point, if I had little kids, I would make sure that they had their heads together and knew their blackness. I have friends that their kid, and one called me, her kid is an adult now. It's kind of went all the way through white America. She said, can you help me with this? Because I want her to know her culture. Because sometimes you become not well balanced. And so you need to have your head together before you go mixing with other people. Because what has happened is that inferiority thing, it kind of presents that's better. And then everything about your own is negative. It doesn't happen to everybody, but it is a thing that we have to kind of watch. So particularly during those formative years, you need to know your history. You need to know so you can have confidence. I've studied this. I didn't do a scientific study, but visually just observing. I've looked at kids, particularly those of the African culture, and I've watched other cultures, and that's something I'm talking about. One of my best friends going through junior high and high school and college was a Haitian. And when I went to their house, they had to speak their language. When I went in an African household, they had to speak their language, and they could speak the other language, but at home. So that was a sense of instilling who they were. And they were told, you know, that you're not less than, and I watched them compared to African American kids. Those kids were very confident. They could come up confidently and talk to anybody, black, white, yellow, green. I said, you know, just the confidence. But if you go in there not knowing who you are, your head kind of gets kind of messed up. And so that was the problem with integration somewhere, because, you know, we were told that's better. When integration, that's when our stuff did start to close down, because all of a sudden now this is not good enough. Oh, we can go over here, this is better. And that kind of thinking has just kind of, you know, went down through the years. Y'all have heard me say this in class before. A lot of blacks today, if they go to Vanderbilt right now, they think they are better, getting a better education than you right now.
Yep, they sure do.
And that's what I'm talking about. So you can't tell them that they're not. So we believe like that. So that's part of the integration. Not saying we won't go back to the days of segregation. Some do, but these are things that we have to look at. We re-examine these kinds of issues. But again, my point is integration has to be a true, you coming to the table and you coming to the table equally, and we're going to exchange. It's not going to be that when I come to this table, I lose and must give up, leave at the door who I am. And that's what integration has forced us. And it's telling you your stuff and your look and your whatever is not good enough. It doesn't measure up. Do y'all see that?
What you're
I'm
saying
sorry.
is kind of,
Go ahead. You go ahead and then I'll go back there.
what you're saying is pretty much the reason why I said what I said about like isolation, because I agree that if all are like, no all, it's never gonna be all, but if like the majority of Caucasian people really truly wanted like this level playing field thing, then it would be different. But because it's not, it's like, to me, it's like, why would you want people on your team who don't want you on the team? They don't want you to be, they're not gonna pass the ball to you. Why would you want them on your team? Like, that's me personally. And then the question about, do black people have the resources or whatever, I think black people have the resources, but they not the organization, like not by a long shot. So I think that's the reason why, like, yeah, right now if all black people move to one place, you know, I don't think that would be a good thing. But I think that if we spend the time, just being honest, economically, I don't think that would really work. But I think that if black people had the time to like become organized, then I think we could do it.
It was a Black Wall Street.
Oh, yeah.
There was Morgantown, Wisconsin or something like that, where that city was completely black, where everything, their money went into the community, came out of the community. They spent, their money rotated within that community where they had their own council, they had their own businesses. You know, we've had that. I think we think of black people as being monolithic, and we're not. We have to get out of the mind state that we're all just one. We all think in oneness. We all think all black people should be this way. I grew up in a project. I grew up with ghetto helicopters. I grew up with seeing my best friend shot in front of my house. My best friend in life grew up in the suburbs of a white neighborhood. She went to a monastery school. She had, like, her parents on her 16th birthday gave her a BMW for her 16th birthday. My mama gave me her old Cutlass. You know?
Bring back right that Cutlass.
I did to this What I'm saying is she missed something that I got with the pride that was instilled in me in being black and being a positive black woman and being able to know who I am. I miss from her family and her upbringing that courtesan type of thing, where it took me a long time to know that ladies don't cross their legs. There's a certain way to speak. When you're talking to somebody, you look them in the eye and you are very intentional in what you're saying. Those things weren't taught to me growing up because that's not the environment that I lived in. And so I think when you say a person has an exterior being black but an interior being white, I think we get caught up too much in the colorism of it. It's just in how you are brought up. It's your foundation. My grandmother was a staunch Republican, did not like Democrats, but because that was her generation. When she grew up, the Republican Party was the party of the black people. So
yeah.
therefore,
That makes
it
sense.
wasn't until later in life that we, as a Black community and as a brown community, started to see, okay, well now it's turning from the Republican Party being the party of Lincoln to being the party of
Trump.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we can have those leaders, and because we are able to have these discussions, I think we're in a safe environment at Fisk University to be able to have these discussions, is being able to have the same discussion with your white counterpart.
And you're gonna talk, I love that you use that term, because in the book, the second book we're gonna use about Bibles BT, Black people, and we had an incident like this, I mean, there are just certain things that are, I don't wanna say innately Black. There is a Black culture, there's a white, we're not negating that. But we were having a discussion among some of my colleagues, and we all know that Aretha Franklin, who's an iconic figure in the Black community, passed away a few days ago. And so we were talking about, she was this wonderful singer. I mean, everybody I grew up listening to Aretha Franklin. And so my point being, we were having this discussion about, okay, who's gonna sing at her funeral? So we were having some ideas. And so we were like, no, this person wouldn't fit because she's at a certain level. This person at the top of the game, what they do, but not in that, it's gotta be somebody churchy, gotta be somebody who can rock the house, somebody can touch the soul, whatever, it's gotta be in that, whatever. But my point is, there were some of us, but some of them were white, and so they were giving their comments, and we didn't say anything, but it was like, this is our discussion. Right?
Nobody asked you.
We didn't say that, but the point being, that's what you're gonna see. There are certain things that we feel we can say in a safe environment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I understand the phenomenon, but I'm not saying it's right.
Right.
I'm definitely not saying that, but that's the point. It's like you have to have a pass. There was in the religious world, there was a famous white preacher, you mentioned, I don't want to mention her name in here, but she was big. I mean, she's a wonderful, dynamic, powerful woman of God, can preach and really good. But she's fallen into disfavor because of her support of Donald Trump. And so people came at her. And so somebody said, we gave you, this is the point I'm making, we gave you a pass into the Black community. And so now you have betrayed us, you're going for Trump. And I'm not saying all this is right or wrong, but I'm just saying that's a real phenomenon. I think because Blacks that's why they do want their Fisk University, they do want their TSU, because they feel like they haven't had anything, so this is ours, and now you want to take that too. So that's the point. I'm not saying it's right, but that's the thinking. But there are those safe zones. Those safe zones, as told by our authors, is the barbershop, in the beauty salon, definitely in the Black church. Even that thing, again, I wouldn't subscribe to do that, but when Jeremiah writes, I mean, that's Black preaching. So Black America, that is shock, but it shocks some other people. Oh my God, this is what they talk about in church. So the Black church is, you cannot talk about Black politics and not talk about religion in the Black church, because it's very much in the center of it. And so you have to understand that culture. And people are just amazed. I think when they had, whose funeral was that? White America was just amazed, but I mean, that was every day to us. So you're gonna hear dynamic singing, everything from opera to down.
Whitney Houston's
Whitney Houston.
All the way down. You're gonna hear that at this funeral, I'm pretty sure. And people are amazed by that culture, but the cultures are very, very different. We cannot deny that. So that doesn't make one better than the other, but they are different. But when I say we have to learn how to work them together. And so, but it's a real thing where Blacks want to take ownership of their part, and they'll let you in. I think Blacks will let people in more, but sometimes since they've been betrayed, they are very suspicious.
That's how they be too. Like,
They
come
came
on
out
in.
with this woman because they felt like it. I remember this person said that. He said, we gave you a pass into the community, and now look what you did.
They need to stop giving out passes, man. Black
Black
people always giving out a pass.
That's about the only time
They let her back in if she does that, but yeah.
But I feel like that's the difference between white people and black people. Like, black people, like, they so forgiving and give out passes. Like I just feel like, no, sometimes I feel like sometimes that's just too much.
I don't know.
Like, you know how,
I don't
for
think
example,
a lot of
just
black
because.
people that forgiving. I don't, me personally, I don't know if it's because of older
They
people,
forgive, but they
but
don't
older,
forget.
yeah, they don't forget. That's the
Yeah.
difference. Older people most definitely, I feel like if they're stuck in that in their old ways, which I'm pretty sure that's almost every average like elderly person, I feel like they still in the back of their head are very conscientious of
what happened.
You know, what had happened. And so that's why I feel like in a sense with Black people overall, it just depends on the upbringing and that experience if they are forgiving or not.
Yeah, I feel like if it was like Mount Zion with Megan Berry, they're expected to forgive.
Of course.
However, I think that with the Black race, we're first going to be rageful first. It's not going to be like just forgiveness off the top. Like, you know, we're going to be mad as hell first. You know, we're going to make sure that you know that we mad, and you know the offense will still be there. And then, you know, after time, the forgiveness might come, but it's never been like an instant forgiveness.
And I'm glad you mentioned it because that's what I was going to talk about today. There's been this projected image that Blacks were just docile and accepting of their status, and they weren't. There have always been protest voices, always. And protest movements, not just voices, but action.
There was always
Prosser, Gabriel Prosser, Denmark Vesey, Nat Turner. These were always people, and you know, you always, when we're talking about CV, you always had this manipulation game and divide and conquer game, but they were betrayed by their own people. So some of them were hung, but they were dealt with because somebody on the inside told it. But they were always, even the slaves, you see in some of the old slave pictures, where they often faked stuff. They did stuff. They didn't just serve the master. They had their own little ways of rebelling. Some subtle, you know, you don't know what I'm doing to your food.
That's what I always used to think. You're not gonna cook for me and I own you.
So you always had those protest voices and actions all the way through, because somehow it's like, you know, we just laid back and, you know, just accepted things as they were. But you begin this divide and conquer. We're going to read some other pieces that I hadn't put in there just here and there. But the divide and conquer, that's a big one. When you start having the highest Negro and the field Negro. You saw that, what was that picture? What was it? How many years a slave?
12.
100 years a slave. Was that on that where Samuel Jackson?
Oh no, that's not
Django. And I remember him talking, he said, you know, before we all saw the film, he was saying, he was playing this part that, you know, Black America wouldn't like, but you've always had that going on. So you always had somebody telling the master. So when you make a division between people, and that's the thing, that some of the people that Trump, because they're getting into trouble too, politically, they, meaning some of the whites, they're in the same position as Blacks. A lot of these people are poor. But the moment you pull that race card, that's the difference. So there's no way I'm going to join hands with you. We're in the same boat. So it works other people's purposes. So the race card is pulled not only by whites, we're going to find out in here, but also by Blacks. To their advantage, not to the people. So that is the card you always pull. I Thurgood Marshall, what's his name? I had 4 hours of sleep, so my thinking facilities are not together. Clarence Thomas, he pulled it. And talking about forgiving, and the Black community came running to his rescue. Because they had him against the wall, and when it looked like he wasn't going to get that nomination, he started using the word, as you all are trying to lynch me, it's like high-tech lynching. That's a buzzword. That's a dog whistle to the Black community. Oh, they're trying to lynch that Black man. We forgot what his ideology is. We see now he's a Black man, and you all better not do that to him. That's how he got in.
Ooh.
That's just like, there's a movie, y'all, everybody with a see, called Black Klansman.
Oh, I saw it.
I saw it. It's awesome. And it is very prevalent to the conversation that we're having today. And it's thought-provoking. And when you see it, you be like, And in some parts it'll make you be like, okay, well, because like you said, we're very conservative. As a people, we're very conservative. We don't like to think that we are, but we are. There are a lot of things, like my grandmother would say, I love Black people, but I don't like niggas. Aren't they one and the same?
What? What'd she say?
My grandmother, she would say, I love my Black people, but I don't like niggas.
Hell, ain't we all?
Meaning that
I'm gonna let her pass.
The word nigger ignorant, it means ignorant, it means incompetent, it means childlike. And anyone can be that.
That's right, right. If you look at the
But a
definition
black person is proud. We are able to walk and talk in our pride, and we are able to wear our hair natural or wear it straight. We are able to speak with an authority that a lot of niggas won't.
Okay, yeah.
So that's where she was coming from. I don't like the word in and of itself, because I just think we have other words in our vocabulary that we can use. But in that movie, it really makes you think about that. So I just thought that was a good movie.
Believe it or not, we're gonna touch on all these issues. We're gonna do something a little bit different on Wednesday, but we're gonna continue this discussion, but it's undergirding the things that we're gonna run through, when we go through these various books. So I want you to put on your thinking hat, think those things through, be open to hear things that make you different, what have you, and draw your own conclusions. Okay, that is it. And I have the names for these people,